obviously this is supposed to be about you as a single mother.
Yeah.
So like, what was it like being one?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I knew you were going to talk to me, I had to think a little bit about being a single mom, and it's not really anything I had ever really, in a conscious way, talked through, even with my therapist. I guess we haven't gotten to that yet, but it was interesting to think about it because in many ways it was easy for me. My ex-husband, we certainly have had times when we got along and times when we really did not. But through all of that, like I got financial support from him that I never even had to ask for. It always just was there, which is something that a lot of women deal with, is men using money to control them and things like that. So I think for me, finding the support from my family and finding the support from my female friends is what made it doable for sure. I think the biggest thing for me is talk to women. So I had an instance a few years ago where some of the boys were telling me, this is just one example, but they were saying there's no such thing as a wage gap. There's no such thing as a wage gap. And I said, well, so what women have you talked to about it? Well, I read this article. And I said, okay, so go home and talk to your mom and ask your mom what her experience has been. Here's what my experience has been. Talk to other women and see what their experiences have been. And I think that's so important, not to assume that you, because you've read something, know how I would feel about something or what my experience has been. I had some friends one time, and they're wonderful grown men who I know, who are very forward thinking and all that kind of stuff. But this is when the Olympics happened a few years ago. And there was a woman who won a gold medal, and I'm trying to think, I think like her husband was her coach, and everybody was focusing on the fact that her husband was the reason for her success, and I don't know, it was just bad. Basically bad. So these men were on Facebook trying to decide if women should be offended by that or not. And I was like, why don't you get off Facebook and go ask the women in your lives how they feel about that? And so I think that's an important piece, is to not assume and not to tell women how they should feel about something, but to ask them how they feel.
Of all your achievements, what do you think, what do you take the most pride in?
So I would say definitely motherhood is the hardest. I always say parenting's not for wimps. And I have to say for me that that is definitely the thing I'm most proud of. I'm also proud, before I got this job at St. Christopher's, the year before that I was teaching full-time. I was reffing field hockey, reffing lacrosse, getting my master's and teaching English at night to adults. And I worked so hard, and I was working so hard on everything to keep everything going and for my future and for my boys' future. And I felt like I'm actually really proud of that. First of all, that's how I worked so hard to get this job. People would say, oh, you're so lucky you got that job at St. Christopher's. I'm like, no, I actually worked really hard to get it, right? But I was really proud because my boys saw me do that. I didn't just say, well, you know, it'd be nice to do those things, but I don't want to take the time or I don't want to put the work in. They watched me put all the work in. And I'm proud of the fact that they got to see that. Like if I wanted something, I worked hard for it. And that's a really valuable lesson, I think, for our kids.
What other women's issues are nearest to your heart? What do you think is important?
Yeah. So I think there's so many going around right now. Well, and let's be honest, there always have been, right? But I think, I don't know. I think really it's that they all fall under the category of if women are treated as actual people, real actual people. And that has to do with like the Me Too movement. That has to do with a whole smattering of women's issues where I feel like very often women are treated more like a legislated piece on a document that a whole bunch of old white men are deciding what should happen to us. And so I'd really like to see that change. I did see the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary called RBG. And I basically wanted to take every young man and every man that I know to go see it. So, and there's a lot in there that talks about, really what surprised me is just how recently even some of the stuff that I take for granted as a woman have been. I mean, it was during Obama's administration that it became illegal to pay a man more for the same job as a woman. That was not that long ago. And there were a lot of things like when around the same time I was born, and I know I'm old to you, but like I'm really not that old, you know, but to you I am, I get that. But it was when there were still rules like I couldn't quit my job unless my husband gave approval for it. And things, obviously I was a baby, so it wasn't affecting me, but those are real issues that really aren't that long ago. And it surprised me how recent all of those things were. So I think one of my favorite quotes is, "The harder I work, the luckier I get," right? So, and I'm a firm believer in working hard to earn something. What I wonder, and I really don't know the answer to this, but I wonder what structures are in place that make it so I can work hard but it won't matter, or you can work hard but it won't matter, or someone else can work hard but it won't matter. I think it goes back really to talk to women, ask their opinion. Don't assume that you know how they should feel about something because your experience is not the same as theirs. And honestly, that's true for everybody. My experience is not the same as yours, or the person next to you, or the person next to you. And if we could just understand that we all come to this place with different stories and backgrounds that shape who we are, and if we let people be themselves enough that we can find out those stories, then we can learn how to be a better community instead of assuming things about people based on who they might be. There are all these things that make us who we are that we can't necessarily understand about other people unless we let them tell us their story.